Well, welcome back. It's good to see you all. Glad to be here. Just started raining, so I wouldn't recommend leaving. Give yourself about an hour. What?
Just gonna quit?
Yeah. Well, it just started raining again. I wouldn't get up. So anyway, I forgot to mention last time that if anybody has any questions or comments or complaints, you can come to my website, johnrobinson.org. And there's an email function there. Just send me an email and I'll write you back. If you have a question, if you have something you want to share, if you want me to address something I haven't talked about, just put it in there and we'll see what happens. So that's good. So here's my agenda for today. I want to do kind of a quick check-in, see how you're all holding up through all of this. I want to do a lecture on the ultimate realizations of the mystical experience. I mean, we talked about that last time, what this experience is. Now this lecture is about, my gosh, what do we get from this experience? What can we understand or divine about how this experience teaches us about the nature of the world and life and God and just the way we are. And then I want to list the keys to mystical consciousness so that you can, then we're going to have an actual experience of mystical consciousness. I want you to have a taste of what we're talking about. And then we'll look at the keys to mystical consciousness, so you'll be able to kind of say, oh, these are the steps that will take me into this space again. And then I'm going to read you some mystical poetry that is guaranteed to enlighten you. Whoa, and Kent wants to see if we can get you all levitating. So anyway, check-in time. How are you? I mean, have you had any, over the course of the week, any interesting reflections on this business of mystical awareness? Have you had any moments when the world suddenly seemed brighter, or you had an insight about life in the sacred world? Any comments, questions, thoughts? Otherwise, I'm going to start talking. So we want to talk about ultimate revelations of the mystical experiences. What do mystical experiences teach us about God, self, and world? And we need to start off with kind of the immediate question, which would be, why don't we experience mystical consciousness more often? I mean, if last week we heard in these mystical experiences that people have them and the world becomes light and there's a presence that surrounds and pervades you and your perception of the world is transfigured and everything is spectacularly beautiful and God is everything. How come this? And they all say over and over again, and this is the way it really is, and they are aggrieved at the sorrow of all of us living in this world and not seeing it. Why is that? Why don't we, like you say, look up at the night sky and then just have our breath taken away? Go, oh my God, this is it. I don't need to go anyplace else other than this. So here's some thoughts. We live in a cocoon of thought, a bubble of self-confirming beliefs that explains everything and gives us the illusion that we understand ourselves and the world. So our thoughts have created a kind of a virtual reality. We see a tree, walk down the road, and we see a tree, and we say, tree, car, another person, dog, and we don't stop and take in any one of them. We have an inner world of ideas and concepts that we overlay immediately onto our life, and so we see primarily what we think. Now, there's a huge difference between thinking and experiencing, and we forget this because we're so caught up in our thought. It's like the difference in swimming. If you've never been in water, you could read 100 books about water. You could read about the science of water and everything, and you could hear other people's firsthand experiences. It wouldn't mean a thing to you until you got in the water, and then you go, oh, this is what they're talking about. That's what the mystical experience asks of us, is that kind of firsthand mystical experience. So this lens of thought filters everything so that we see our beliefs and not what is. It's really kind of like the cult of culture. It defines what we can and cannot see. It's consensual reality. We see what we're programmed to see, and the philosophers call this, something I just learned this morning, simulacrum, which has to do with we create this reality that we all share, and right now we're doing it with cell phones and high-def TV and computers and video games and all that stuff. So we are so caught up. People walk down the road with their cell phone, like this, and they don't see where they're going. They fall in fountains. But worse than that is that they don't see this astounding place we live in. So the Buddha said it so beautifully 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. He said, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. It's so powerful. With thoughts, we construct this idea of who I am and where I am and who you are and what's going on and what the purpose of life is and all that. And we get caught up in this virtual reality and we stop seeing where we are. Our minds, in other words, have been completely hijacked by the left hemisphere. And of course, as I mentioned the other day, the evolutionary value of language is huge, and its advantages are tremendous. I mean, ideas, maps, science, communication, schedules, technology, values, cell phones, identity, it's all part of the world of man that we've created. And if you want to get a letter from here to your friend in New York, it's invaluable. If you want to fly any place in the world, you got to have it. It's incredibly important. The downside is that it comes at the expense of time spent in the right hemisphere, which opens, as Jill Boat Taylor told us last time, opens directly into the divine. So we have an access, we have a doorway into divine consciousness. We never stop to go into it. We never pass through that door. So the right hemisphere is about consciousness, about acute sensory awareness, about stillness, about silence, about mystery, about radical awe, that kind of, like this night skies. Oh my God. And you know when we're in that radical awe, we always say that. Oh my God, you know? So it's all about experiencing the divine, and it's absolutely a real experience. We just don't have the time or take the time to do it. Partly because we're constantly being dragged back into the world of thought. You go there for a moment and you say, but I'm running out of time, I got things I have to do, and anyway, this is crazy. Or it's because we assume that if you were to really live in the experience of God, well, it's just not possible. There's no way to do that. If you were in the supermarket and the checker said, hey, how you doing? Did you find everything? And you said, yeah, I found God. God is here now. I feel so good. This is incredible. Oh, you are so beautiful. I love you. So if you tell someone you're experiencing God, they think you're mentally ill. But I can tell you that as an expert in mental illness, that that's not true. I know mental illness. People bring the crazy ideas of God into their mental illness. And people who are really what you would call have obsessive religiosity, they talk about God all the time and so forth. But there's a huge and objective and scientifically established difference between those people and mystics. There really is. And what's so interesting is mystics, the individuals who are caught up in obsessive religiosity or a psychotic crisis that's filled with ideas of God and Jesus and I'm these things, those people are not happy. They're not peaceful. They don't feel safe. They can't settle down. They can't relax. There's not a space that feels loving and whole and one with the universe. Mystics, on the other hand, are happier. They are not afraid to die. They're better adjusted. They're peaceful. They're socially comfortable with each other. They have a loving nature. And they're not at all worried about the devil, or hell, or religious warfare, or that kind of thing. So to the experienced mental health professional, there's a huge difference. So I'm here to tell you that don't worry if you experience God. You're not crazy, but people may think you are. But that's why you keep it to yourself. Until you find a group like this that kind of is getting on board with the idea, and then you share it. So here's the point. We have forgotten how to experience the divine. When we turn to theology and scripture and religious writers, we do so because we can't find God for ourselves, and we're looking in the wrong place. God is not what you think or believe. Thoughts and beliefs are useful, they're helpful, they're like pointers. They're meant to kind of point us beyond themselves into this thought-free awareness of a living consciousness all around us. But if we start trying to think about that again, well, we've left it. So there is the craziness to it, the conundrum of it. So we have God all around us, and we keep looking for God in books and beliefs. In fact, we have forgotten how to experience our own state of divinity. For if unity means anything, it means we are all part of the divine. So How do we overcome this thought-driven world that separates us from God? So I have a series of mystical insights I want to share with you that kind of come out of these mystical experiences I described to you. And like a compass, I think that if you take them in, if you really say, oh, I gotta experience that, it takes you right out of the words, out of the belief systems, into the experience. So here's the path back. These are some pretty amazing realizations, so buckle your seatbelts. And this is what Thomas Keating was really talking about last week when he says, in Lent we are called upon to open a new reality, that is our true self and beyond. So in this space of consciousness, we are discovering our true self and beyond. It's a profound shift we're making. So here's a series of mystical realizations that can help us turn the great ship around and head in the direction of the divine. The first one shouldn't surprise you. It simply says, you are not who you think you are. Really, you are not who you think you are. The self-idea, the self-concept, the persona is only a belief. It's not who you are. We are all so much more beautiful and amazing and miraculous than we could ever think or believe. And the world is so much more amazing, miraculous, and beautiful than we think or believe. So the moral here, the first one is, stop thinking. Now I'm going to show you how in a few moments, but I know it sounds crazy. Nobody thinks they can stop thinking, but you can. It's a shift. So the second one is taking us even further into this experience. There is only one consciousness. It's in me, I'm in it, you're in it, it's in you, it's everywhere. It's the self-idea that gives us the illusion that consciousness is only inside my head, that I'm not in it. So more than that, this consciousness that we're all experiencing is actually God's consciousness, okay? The mystics from across time and tradition have said this over and over again. They say the universe, the cosmos, is conscious and alive. It's everywhere saturated with this divine intelligence, this divine presence. Now you can call it cosmic consciousness, presence, Holy Spirit, self, cosmic Christ, divine consciousness, a million names for it. And every religion has its own name because every religion is trying to point the direction of that experience. So the implications of this realization are astounding. It means that my consciousness is God's consciousness. Your consciousness is God's consciousness, and consciousness is all around us. So I want to explain that a little bit more because I know that sounds a little insane. We grow up as children in this pervasive everywhere consciousness. We don't need to have an inside and an outside or a self and another. We're just in it. We start thinking, and with the help of education and culture, we build this whole inner world of ideas and beliefs and pictures and assumptions and so forth. And through an entirely unnoticed sleight of hand that we don't even know happens, we take consciousness, which is everywhere, suddenly inside our belief system, okay? It's like we wrap our mind around a piece of consciousness and say, oh, this is mine because I'm a me and I know me and you're a you, so this must be my part of the consciousness. And then as soon as we say that, it becomes the conventional materialistic belief that consciousness is only here. Okay, it's not anywhere else. But we have all these, indications to the otherwise. People who have out-of-body experiences, near-death experience, mystical experiences, they all tell us that's not the case. But a conventional belief system is that this is how we're built. As soon as the I thought arises in consciousness, we think it's the source of consciousness. We make that mistake. And then what happens is then we each believe we have our own consciousness and we go on about life as automatons separate from each other, no longer one with each other, the world, and all living things. It's a kind of an amazing shift that takes place that we don't talk enough about. So what all this means is that to know God directly, we need only cease our mental chatter, okay? Erase this conceptual inner world just for a moment, and actually it disappears when you stop thinking. See, that's really the magic of this. As soon as you stop thinking, it's gone, okay? And so is the idea of you. We create this idea of me over and over again by, it comes up, we think about it, suddenly I've reinstated the entire identity and story of my life. But if you stop thinking and you stay in this open space of consciousness without thought, everything is different than what you thought. It's all kind of amazing. So it's a startling realization. So to become consciousness of consciousness itself is to be in direct contact with God. Get it? I mean, isn't that kind of like amazing? Now, we also discover that consciousness is itself the source and experience of the divine presence. Source, that consciousness is presence. We are all part of this presence. If consciousness is God, then you are experiencing God's presence whenever you become conscious of consciousness. So, and I'm talking about a consciousness unpolluted by thought. I mean, as soon as you think, oh, that's great, but I don't really believe it, well, then you get caught up in these idea systems and you've lost the contact. But so I want to say a few things about presence. Some time ago, every book I've ever written has been an attempt on my own part to understand something, to figure it out for myself. So this was a book called Ordinary Enlightenment, Experiencing God's Presence in Everyday Life. It was endorsed by John Gray, the Mars and Venus guy. And so what I thought through was this: what is presence? How do we experience it, and how does it change us? And so this is really the grist for the mill. This is the stuff of transformation, and it's so simple, is what I'm really saying. So let me just give you some ideas about what presence is and how it is something that, if we, as simple as it is, stepping into it changes everything. Presence is a personal, subjective, here and now, one-of-a-kind encounter with God. It is not something that you can mechanically replicate or imitate or model on another person's experience. Like jumping in the water, you have to have the experience yourself to get it. Presence is located most distinctly in the stillness and silence and timelessness that pervade everything in the present moment. In the stillness, silence, and timelessness. That opens to presence. It's often associated with the realization that space itself is conscious and alive. Wow. I mean, when you really absorb that, it's a profound realization. So that locating presence involves the sharpening and heightening of awareness, and so that the immediacy and aliveness of surrounding space is sensed with a keen, penetrating, and thoughtless awareness, as if you're trying to experience another person's presence in a pitch black room. You've got that kind of, you're trying to tune in as best you can, except that the other person is the consciousness of space itself. The presence is, we discover, is beyond thought, beliefs, feelings, images, or imaginings. It's not something that we conjure up. It's not found in visualization. It's not an active imagination exercise. It's beyond all that. Presence must be encountered as a real and tangible consciousness. This is not woo-woo stuff, although people will make it woo-woo stuff. It is a direct and first-hand experience that we're all capable of. We've just mislabeled it as something else. We come into the presence in countless ways, like prayer, meditation, scripture reading, nature. But it's not the activity so much as a state of consciousness that suddenly opens, like looking up at the night sky. That's a moment of mystical opening. Once we learn to sense the presence, we begin to find it everywhere. Well, that's no surprise. And then we begin what the mystics throughout the ages have called the practice of presence. So it's like whether you're in the supermarket, don't be driving, or whether you're walking in the woods, or whether you're sitting with your dog, and you stop thinking. It's like mindfulness. Mindfulness is the biggest fad these days, but it needs to go about 5 steps further and realize that what you're becoming mindful of is the divine. So when you're sitting with your dog in this wide open consciousness and your dog is looking at you, this mystical experience is beginning to open. Though the presence seems to come and go, in reality, it's our awareness of presence that comes and goes, and it's especially elusive when we are emotionally upset, when we're rushed, when we're caught up in all of our ego-inflating projects and plans and schemes. And in fact, awareness of presence can be lost or forgotten for months and weeks and years and decades. You know, you had this experience and then you get caught up in the flow of life and all of its thoughts and goals and ambitions and problems and things you're supposed to think about, and you don't have this again until, you know, you're a grandparent and your child's, you know, the grandchild is playing in the sand and you watch the sun playing on her hair and the sparkling on the water, and suddenly it begins to come back to you. As one comes, now what is the value and experience of presence like? What does presence bring us? As one first comes into the presence, there's sometimes a noticeable increase in ambient light, just like they were talking about in those mystical experiences. Falling gently on things nearby, the light of presence makes everything more beautiful and bright and crystal clear and fascinating. The world is subtly and wonderfully transfigured in its soft celestial illumination, which is itself the presence, light. Remember, they kept saying in those experiences that light was somehow conscious and alive and intelligent and full of love, and it was everywhere. So when we open our senses, getting out of your head requires that you open your senses, and when you open your senses, the thinking stops by itself. It's a pretty neat little trick that people don't seem to realize. So that all experiences that bring you to your senses bring you to the edge of a mystical awareness. Once it is located, people begin to describe the presence as sweet, intimate, gentle, loving, forgiving, unconditional, uncritical, accepting, patient. It is never tired, disinterested, frustrated, angry, always waiting for us. The presence is the ultimate mercy, empathy, and intimacy. In the presence, there's such a sense of closeness and oneness and okayness about everything, and you just relax. As we let the experience of presence come closer, surrounding and touching us like the warm softness of a blanket, we often begin to feel peaceful, content, safe, relaxed. There's no fear, time urgency, or worry in this loving and protected space. And experiencing this closeness or oneness with presence often evokes immense joy, as you may discover later in an exercise we're going to do, which in some way describes the soul's reunion with the divine. I mean, in this silent moment, in the consciousness of pure silence, and the way it manifests in your body, things start happening that you've never had time to notice, and it usually has to do with joy and wonder and love and awe. So what's the value of presence? Spending time in the presence changes us. It makes us more like the presence itself, which is so amazing. Increasingly, we take on its nature: calm, serene, patient, loving, accepting, kind, aware of the beauty and value of everyday life, the world, and all living things. Time in the presence is healing. Cradled in the experienced kindness of God, we recognize the error of our self-centered ways, our violent emotions gradually melt away, upsets are seen for what they are, misunderstandings that are temporary, self-created, and misleading. Okay? Holding every human drama is always the holiness of presence, a sanctuary, really, that we can return to any time. Now, this experience of presence does not fix our problems in the traditional sense, but time and story and the whole soap opera quality of our life disappear in the presence. It's like that stuff is an overlay of mind. And when you stop thinking and heighten awareness, and let your emotions settle, because your emotions always want to drag you back into thoughts and upsets, but as you let yourself settle and you come into this space of consciousness, you wonder, what was that all about? Why? I mean, it's a form of insanity to get really upset in some ways. In God, life is not a linear sequence of past, present, and future, a problem to be solved or a goal to be reached. It is the eternal now, opening like a flower in the mystical experience of being. So when you're in this state of being, it's as if there is no time, there is no future, there is no past. There is just this thing that's happening that is such a mystery, such a beautiful space. So I got two more things I'll say, and then I'll stop for questions. Speaking of being, all being, just as all consciousness is God's consciousness, all being is God's being. Being refers to the physical dimension of existence, life in the material world. Well, the mystics, as we heard last week, all say over and over again that this too is God, and that the world is God's actual physical incarnation. God not only loved the world, but became the world. God is the world. It's duality. Duality is really the difference between what is and what we think it is. And so when we overlay this I think it is stuff, we miss the is. And that's why it's so important to cease the mind's thinking and come back into the immediate firsthand realization of what is, because what is far more beautiful than we ever pay attention to, and it's infinitely sacred and it's holy. I mean, it's a space that we're too busy to notice, and we need to notice much more. So, and also conscious being, when you bring consciousness into your own physical being, the mystics call this one of the forms of unity, because the separation of being and consciousness are sort of an artificial distinction that human beings make because they aren't spiritually evolved enough to see it all as one. But when we bring them together, they dissolve into one thing. And then you have this joy of being that the mystics talk about, that is what we really are. And from a state of conscious being, our behavior becomes far more beautiful. I mean, we act from a place of love and joy and generosity, not from a place of self-protection and search for security and opinions and points of views and arguments. So, at this point in my talk, you may be noticing that your left brain is getting tired. You may begin to notice that your left brain is also beginning to argue with me. It's beginning to say things like, this guy, oh, he's all right, I like him all right, but he's a little off the page. A rock can't be God, I'm not God, this is nuts. I'm not going down that road. But here's the crux. If you get caught up in your left brain thought again, if you get all debating about that, well, you're going to prove it's true, because your thoughts are going to take over, and that's going to be your reality. And the curtain on the mystical dimension will close, and then it's gone. So whenever you worry about whether this is going too far out, just stop thinking and be still, and come back to this space of wonder and beauty and presence and present, and all that stuff will just go away like leaves in the fall winds. I mean, then you go, this place is beautiful. Have you ever seen so many beautiful faces right now shining in the light of this celestial wonder that is here? I mean, I see it. When you shift to this mode, it becomes, I love you people. I mean, it just bursts with this kind of, everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be right now in this moment. It's all right. You don't have to figure, and you don't have to figure it out, because if you try to start figuring it out, you've left. Get what I mean? That's really important. So, in conclusion, let me summarize. It's all about transcending language. If you describe the world with scientific language, you'll see it in terms of scientific principles. If you see it in political terms, you'll argue about government and history. If you see it in theological terms, you'll argue theology. The doorway to the mystical experience, to the first-hand experience of the divine, is in a consciousness free of thought. Okay? If you think about stuff, if you try to figure out, you're lost. I mean, then the dog's chasing its tail again. Stop that and wait. They're always talking about waking up. I mean, and enlightenment is always about waking up. And Buddha's name really is translated as the awakened one. Well, why? Because awakening is like, that's what it is. It's not thinking about whether something's true or not. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, because only consciousness can pass through. Everything else is false self. You can't bring your stuff, and you can't bring your belief systems, and you can't bring your identity, because all that stuff won't go through the needle, because it's all thought. Okay? And when you move away from, when it's all pure consciousness, even the needle disappears. So, and the desert experience of Lent represents this silencing of language and belief in the service of pure awareness, just like the vision quest described in my novel. In this state of consciousness, the divine opens naturally right where you are as who you are and what is right in front of you. So let's stop for a minute before we totally shift gears into an experience. These are big ideas. You know, you're not what you think. All consciousness is God's consciousness. All being is God's being. Consciousness is presence. You know, how are you doing? Is it okay so far? So I want to do something now before we run out of time that will help us move from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere, okay? I have a simple little exercise for you, a little taste of mystical consciousness. Are you up for it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if anybody's not, that's entirely okay. Just tune out for the next 10 minutes, you know, and think of happy thoughts. But for those intrepid souls that are coming with me, don't worry about doing this right. Don't worry about doing it perfectly, because you know what? That makes you start thinking again. So you don't want to go there. Don't worry about whether anything is happening. Just follow these directions. Notice what you notice. This is an experiment in consciousness. I shouldn't use that word.
It's all right. Don't worry about it.
Experiment in mystical awareness. Okay. Oh, you know what I mean. Okay. You're getting self-conscious. Okay, so deep breath. Whew. Okay, too many words. Way too many words. Let's just rush them out the door. Let go of everything. Let go of this whole house of cards that is our mental structure, and relax. But keep your eyes open. Eyes open. Take a moment to quiet your mind. Get comfortable in your chair. Keep your eyes open. This is not meditation. It's not guided imagery. It's not contemplation. It may be different from anything you've ever done before, so don't fall into like overlearned, patterns of spiritual practice. So here's where it begins. Listen to the silence. Listen to the silence. Sense the stillness of the present moment that is everywhere. Simply sit quietly in this stillness. Anytime your thoughts resume, simply go back to silence and stillness and make it a sensory thing. Sense it, hear the silence. Sense how still it is right now. Now, in this still and silent moment, I want you to heighten and sharpen your senses. In other words, become as awake and alert and aware as you possibly can. Okay? As if you heard a sound, strange sound outside your door at night, and you went, that kind of, you don't think about anything, you're just tuning in. So you're in silence and stillness, you're in the present moment, and you're as awake as you can be, really, really awake, intensely awake. Now I want you to focus your vision and this intense sensory awareness on something close to you, maybe 12 to 20 inches away. One thing. It could be the cloth of your pants, your hand, a pencil, the seat back in front of you, the table. Just pick one thing and just start looking at it intensely. In the silence, in the stillness, in the awakened awareness. As you look at that thing, examine its texture, its construction, its color, its pattern. Notice how the light plays on it. See it exactly as it is without thought, labels, or interpretations. Pure sensory perception, like you've never seen it so clearly before. silent, still, intensely aware, focusing on this object. As you look at it, I want you to become aware of your own consciousness. In other words, become conscious of consciousness itself while you're looking at that object. Be aware of your awareness as that focal point holds your focus. You may be able to notice now that consciousness is existing all around you, as if space itself had become alive and aware. This consciousness is God, but don't think about that. Just be aware of this holy moment, this brightening. Now, in this state of heightened consciousness, it may further change your perception of the object you're looking at. Look at it intensely, without thought. It may seem brighter, more beautiful, more interesting, more radiant, more alive. Perhaps you've already noticed that, and it is because you're dissolving the lens of thought that separates you from the divine world. In this consciousness, keep looking at that focal point. You discover that everything is infinitely beautiful, infinitely precious, perfect, enchanting, radiant, alive, amazing, full of love. In this intensity of perception, thought-free intensity of perception, you discover that the divine world is still here. You're looking at it. It never left. You did when you went to live in your mind, but you can come back. You knew this world as a child. You can find it again right now as an adult. Really absorb this experience. Experience it as fully as you can. Now bring this pure and thought-free consciousness into your body. Feel the being of your being, the energy of embodiment. This energy, this being, is God's being. That's what unity means. It's all God, even you. It's God being you. See if you can feel a place of joy deep inside, bubbling up with this realization. This is the bliss of being that underlies all being, the mystics say. From this place comes love that is unconditional and joyous and free. What happens when you feel this joy? Like a good scientist, just observe what you're experiencing without thought. In the silent, still, focus on this one thing, conscious of consciousness that is now everywhere, conscious of the being of your being. Good. Okay, so it's time now to return to normal consciousness. So, move around a little bit, sit up, get back in touch with your normal self-experience. Try to get the operating system of your mind back online. And notice as you do so how you change. As the operating system begins to take over and as the mind comes back online, what changes? So this has been a gentle, tentative step into mystical consciousness, a taste, and no one does it perfectly. and it takes practice. But what did you notice? So show of hands, how many of you could notice that the object you picked became increasingly more interesting and beautiful? Could you notice that? It was like, oh, I never looked at that screw in the table before. That's really interesting. How many of you could notice a sense of a larger consciousness that when you held your consciousness focused on the one thing? Good, good. And the joy of being that you were able to drop in. The consciousness thing is interesting because we lose this kind of consciousness because we're always moving back and forth, and this movement all the time keeps constantly re-stimulating the neurological system to recreate through the parietal lobes and the frontal lobes this structure of our of the reality that we create. When you sit still and hold your consciousness on one thing and become conscious of it, you begin, it freezes that movement. And people in meditation, they lose their whole body, when they get good at it. I mean, they're not there anymore. And as what's his name says, I can't remember his name, says that, when you have reached that state, it's not you meditating anymore. It's you being meditated. So it's that kind of thing that we're talking about here. The self kind of disappears. Here, I want to give you the keys to this process so that you can kind of like realize what you're doing when you're doing it again. The key number one is to stop thinking. Okay. Well, but the thing is that the way I know the way to do it is key number two, intensely focus on the awareness and perception in the present. So anybody can stop thinking for 30 seconds or 1 second. I'll start easily. 1 second, 3 seconds, okay? And then when you shift into a sensory mode, this acute sensory mode, I mean, if you're walking a balance beam, remember the teenage thing, or you're walking on a log across a river, you're so sensory, you're not thinking about anything. They could not make you think of something else because you really need, evolution has made it possible for us to be so aware that thought stops. So, and that in many ways is the ticket into this other experience. And then the third key is to experience the world exactly as it is, okay, without names or judgments or beliefs. And, it's like it's like you were dead for 10,000 years and you got to come back for one afternoon. How would that be? I mean, just that is that kind of awareness of the world. And then come into the presence, number 4, through your own presence. Well, the easiest thing is your consciousness is the presence when it's clear of thought. Just be aware of your own awareness, be present. Your own being present opens to the divine in a space where you're not thinking. And then 5 is come into being through your own being. And that evokes this sense that people have talked about, the joy of being, the ground of being, the wonder of being one with the being of the world. And number 6 is once you're there, I mean, well, you're not there anymore as a person. I mean, you're not the person you think you are because that person is put aside for a while. You're in this other space of consciousness and you're feeling this joy of being. So the key 6 is be happy. And love unconditionally. It's so easy to just love from this space. And then key 7, which we'll talk about next time, is live in garden consciousness. In the presence, the mystics have been telling this forever, in the presence, the world is transfigured back into Eden. It never left. We left when we got into our brain, into our left brain, and forgot that it was here. And don't go back looking for it because we thought we were kicked out of creation. We weren't, we left. We just walked out on our own because we were so excited about thinking, about all things, the thinking and the self-concept. And my self-concept could be as big as Trump's. I mean, my God, I could just do anything I want. And that is so seductive that we get caught up in this whole world of man. And then what happened to God? Oh, I don't know. I mean, I got more important things to do. And that's, so I want to close with some mystical poetry. It's a mystical poet. It says the same thing. I love poets because they have the same way of just saying it in a way that startles your normal conventional thought process, and you go, "Oh yeah, I get it." So this is called a prayer of unknowing. Isn't this what we're really talking about? Of unknowing all the things that we know that get us caught up in this world. by John Curvin. He says, "Here in the valley of desire, let me be speechless, free at least for a moment of all the words and images that clutter my soul, that blind me to your presence, that stand in your way. Help me feel at home with what I do not know, with what I cannot know, for it is only in the dark, only in silence, only in my surrender that you are visible." It's when thought stops that this space becomes what those people were talking about last week. And this is a great one by Joan Chittister. I love this one. This is a dialogue between an elder, like a wise elder, a sage, and a disciple or a student. And it's an amazing dialogue. So it says, "Where shall I look for enlightenment?" the disciple asked. "Here," the elder answered. "Well, when will it happen?" the disciple asked. "It's happening right now." "Then why don't I experience it?" he persisted. "Because you do not look." "But what should I look at?" "Well, nothing, just look." "Well, what at anything your eyes alight upon." "But must I look in a special kind of way?" "No, the ordinary way will do." "But don't I always look in the ordinary way?" "No, you don't." "But why ever not?" "Because to look you must be here, and you're mostly somewhere else." Isn't that great? "Where shall I look for enlightenment?" "Here." "When will it happen?" "Right now." "Then why don't I experience it?" "Because you do not look." I mean, you're looking at your cell phone. I mean, it's not in your cell phone. So Rumi, wonderful Sufi poet, says, "The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep." People are moving back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. So, I mean, this is so much the same thing. It's like when you're camping, and you get up in the morning and you come out of the tent and you're hit with just the coldness and the way it is and the wetness and just the pure smells of the woods and so forth. So that's the breeze at dawn. Don't go back to sleep. It's inviting you into the world. You must ask for what you really want. I mean, do you really want a new cell phone or do you want this? People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. See, that's the world of thought and the world of awareness. Two different places. And we all go back and forth across it every day, many times. You're reading a book and you think you're finding all the answers, then you sit back and you look up and you hear the chimes of your grandfather clock, go off and you go, "Oh," and there it was. It was right there. And you go back to reading again. So that's going back and forth across the doorsill. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Two more and then we'll stop. This is one about from Theodore Rothke called Lost Son. And it brings us into aging, but it doesn't need to bring us into aging. It could be any time. No. Well, some of us are aging. So, but I love this poem because it shows you this guy's movement from an everyday consciousness into a mystical consciousness, into a realization. And this is how it works. So he says, "It was beginning winter, and in between time, the landscape still partly brown, the bones of weeds kept swinging in the wind above the blue snow." So that's what he's looking at. He says, it was beginning winter. The light moved slowly over the frozen field, over the dry seed grounds, the beautiful surviving bones swinging in the wind. Light traveled over the wide field, stayed. The weeds stopped swinging. The mind moved not alone through the clear air in the silence. Was it light? Was it light within? Was it light within light, stillness becoming alive and yet still? A lively, understandable spirit once entertained you, it will come again. Be still. Wait. See, that's that shift from you drop into that, you're stunned by the sensory beauty, things are moving, and then the light becomes more intense. You've all had this experience, and then your breath catches, and you go, oh my. And then you have sense that there is a presence everywhere around you. You've just stepped into it, and this is this beautiful transformation of consciousness that happens to us all the time. So I would like to close with one very short poem by David White, who you all know David White. He's a wonderful poet. He lives on Vashon? No, he lives on Bainbridge. Where does he live? He lives in Langley. He lives in Langley. Anyway, it's called Enough. It's called Enough, and he says, I can't find it. He says, enough. These few words are enough. If not these words, this breath. If not this breath, this sitting here, opening to the life that we have refused again and again until now. Until now. Thank you. Next week, we'll be talking about the kingdom of God. As you can imagine, all this stuff leads directly into the kingdom of God. So we'll be hearing from the mystics, actually wrote a whole book about the mystics, from all the traditions who have this idea and experience of the divine world everywhere, the kingdom of God, heaven on earth. It's everywhere in every religion for the mystics. So we'll learn what they say and how and where it is. See you next week.